All right, welcome to another episode of the Family Law Report, where we are covering interesting family law news and discuss some of the current topics that are going to be relevant to any family law litigants. I am attorney David Enevoldsen, and I am here with my partner Chris Rike.
Greetings.
Together, we form up Family Law Guys, which is an Arizona family law firm based out of Scottsdale, Arizona, and we help divorcing parents avoid getting screwed out of time with their children. Before we get into the actual episode, we have to do our lawyerly disclaimers. First off, just be aware that we are, drinking out of mugs with ice in them.
Sorry. Yeah, it's occurred to me. Don't shake it in front of the mic.
Yes. We are only licensed in Arizona. So when we're talking about any sort of legal concepts, generally speaking, we're either talking in a very general way or we are talking about Arizona specific law. So just be aware that family law is very state specific, meaning that what we say about what happens in Arizona could be a totally different rule if you're in another state. Second, don't take anything we say as legal advice. We are just speaking in a general nature. Everything we're talking about is just general information about family law. If you need to talk to an attorney about and get advice in your case, definitely reach out and speak to somebody that is licensed to practice in your state. Lastly, just understand that we're not developing any attorney-client relationships by virtue of us doing this podcast. This is just, we're providing you information based on experience we've seen. But if you need to talk to an attorney, if you need specific legal advice, go talk to somebody. You can certainly give us a call, but call someone. If you want to reach out to us, you can check us out at our website, which is familylawguys.com, or you can reach out at 480-565-8680. All right, with those disclaimers out of the way, let's kind of jump into the show itself. Our main topic for today is going to be orders of protection, also commonly known as restraining orders in a more vernacular sense, but in Arizona, we call them orders of protection. Before I jump into that, I want to hit up a couple of just current events, things that are in the news right now. So I find it interesting to kind of look at some of the celebrity stuff that's going on. A few headlines related to celebrities. One is tied back to Jennifer Lopez. Now, currently she's going through a divorce with Ben Affleck, although that's not what I wanted to necessarily talk about today. Interestingly, there was a recent report that came out that said her divorce process may last longer than the marriage to Ben Affleck. Sounds like they're having a very difficult time going through this divorce process. But what I do want to talk about today is her ex-husband, who's named Ojani Noah. He was married to J-Lo for 11 months back in 97 to 98. So it was a little while ago. Recently he... during the course of J-Lo's current divorce, he did an interview with Despierta America. It's a show that's in Spanish. And in that show, he actually said, he was talking about his marriage to J-Lo, and he said that the divorce was partially Diddy's fault. Everybody, I'm sure you've heard all the news about Diddy lately. He's been a hot topic in the press. But he said, quote, when Sony came and paid her millions, there was Puffy, who was going to be one of the producers of several tracks on the first album. That's where the deception, the lies, the separation started. A year after that divorce in 99, J-Lo actually started a relationship up with Diddy. Just seems like an interesting tie. Number one, J-Lo is going through clearly multiple divorces here. But now we've got all this stuff going on with Diddy, who J-Lo's ex-husband is now saying like Diddy was the cause of the divorce, essentially, because she kind of got sucked in his world. There's a lot of stuff. If you haven't heard about all the Diddy things, just Google it. It's kind of insane. TMZ did some really interesting specials on it, which I don't know if you've seen those, Chris, but they're fascinating and go into the whole controversy surrounding what's happening with him right now.
No, I was just wondering.
All right,
they have a couple, at least one minor kid, don't they? J-Lo?
I don't recall. I don't know. Maybe.
I think,
I could be wrong.
Oh, with the ex-husband. I was just curious. Would whatever happens with P. Diddy, how would that be? Would that be relevant in a child custody case?
Well, I don't know. I guess it depends.
It certainly seems like the kind of thing a parent would want to bring up in court.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, we definitely see that kind of thing. I guess it depends on what it is.
Yeah.
If it was like some indication that there was some serious sexual impropriety, like with a minor, or, or something like that, because that is part of the allegations that I've been hearing about P Diddy have
Yeah.
involved sexual misconduct with minors. There's the whole thing with what's his name, Bieber.
Yeah. I guess at this point it would have to implicate J Lo's conduct, though, not just
Right.
P
Yeah.
Diddy's.
Exactly. So that's what I'm saying. I don't know exactly
Yeah.
what the allegations would be there. So maybe, depending on what it was, or
Certainly some
what she
interesting
did.
discovery issues.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway.
One other headline I have, another weird blend of old and new here. So Nicole Kidman recently hit the press. And this is tying back to, we're going even a little further back, sort of, or about the same time frame, I guess. Going back to her marriage with Tom Cruise. Now, she and Tom Cruise got married back in 1990,
Wow.
and then they got divorced in 2001. So it's been a little bit, a couple decades now since they were together. Now, there's an image that has been circulating around for many years, since the time of her divorce, basically. You may or may not have seen it. It's kind of interesting. Google it if you haven't, because uh, it looks compelling, and it's got Nicole Kidman. She's wearing like these green pants, green tennis shoes. She's got on like a pink or red top or something, and she looks like she's super happy. And so that image has been long presented as her leaving her attorney's office after she was finalizing her divorce with Tom Cruise. So everybody's just kind of known that for a long time. Well, in this recent interview that she just did with GQ, Kidman comes out and says that was actually not a picture of her leaving her lawyer's office. That was rather a picture of her on a set of some film. She didn't say which film. For some reason, fans are going nuts over this. There was a whole lot of social media, just craziness, in essence saying she's a liar. This actually was her coming out of her attorney's office. I got a couple of quotes here of just things people have said. For example, one said, "There is not a single role of hers around that time period where she dressed like that or wore her natural hair. Lies." Another one said, "I'm fascinated by this because it's such an easily disprovable lie." Another one said, "I looked for evidence. This is not from a movie." Another one said, "Okay, I just did a deep dive on this. And not only does she not specify which movie it was, none of her legions of fans even have a hypothesis as to which movie it could have been. So I feel comfortable concluding she's lying, and it really is a post-divorce paparazzi shot." So I just found this kind of interesting in that it ties back to the divorce. I don't really know what the motivation for her to lie about that would be.
How bizarre.
It's, but that's one of our other headlines there. So that'll kind of bring a wrap for the news for this particular show. Let's jump into the substance of our show, which is going to be on about orders of protection. Now, like I said before, an order of protection, it's most often called restraining order in a kind of colloquial sense or vernacular sense. In Arizona, under our legal system, we specifically call them orders of protection, and that's kind of a subgrouping of what you might call a restraining order. They're, in a general sense, it's an order from a court that the court sends to a person and says, you're not allowed to harass somebody. You're not allowed to commit acts of violence against this person. Usually you can't talk to them or approach them. You can't be around them. Sometimes it'll say things like you can't be in their home, especially in situations where you got two people that are living together. When you are... when you get one of these, if you violate it, so let's say... one other thing. Let me back up a step. So one other thing is that orders of protection are specifically about things that have a special relationship. I'll talk about that more in just a second. But it's usually like some sort of family thing, like husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend. Could be siblings, anything like that. If somebody gets an order of protection against another person, and that person violates the order of protection, let's say, for example, Chris and I somehow qualified for the relationship component of this, and then Chris gets an order of protection against me. He says, like, David's been harassing me and he's committing acts of domestic violence against me or something. If I now get served with that and ignore it, and I go to Chris's house and I'm like, hey, what's up, man? I heard you got this order of protection against me. I'm now violating a class 1 misdemeanor. So I can get criminally charged for that. I can get arrested, all other bad things. It can have implications on a family court case. If you have, existing custody case or something, it can have some serious ramifications there. Going back to that relationship thing for just a second. So there does have to be, for an order protection, there has to be some sort of relationship dynamic. If you don't have a relationship that is sort of familial in nature, or something like one of the things I was talking about a minute ago, like you live in the same house, you've got a kid together, a parent-child dynamic, you've got a romantic partner of some sort, blood relationships, marital relationships. If you don't have one of those things, then generally you have to go to a different type of restraining order called an injunction against harassment.
Could it work if you have just like have a roommate, like you rent out a room to somebody and you're living together?
I,
Could you get it?
yeah, I believe
Okay.
that covers under order protection, because
Yeah,
one of them is like if you're living
in
together.
the
I
same
think
house.
that creates, yeah, I think that creates the relationship dynamic. Um, Now that's one piece of what you have to show in order to get it, is that there is some sort of relationship. The other thing is that you have to be able to demonstrate that they're either the other person has committed an act of domestic violence within the previous year, or they are likely to commit an act of domestic violence. So you have to be able to show those two things: relationship and did commit or is likely to commit an act of domestic violence. Some quirky things about the orders of protection. One is that they can restrict your ability to have a firearm.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to that scenario a minute ago, if Chris got an order of protection against me somehow, then there's a possibility that I could have in that order, it says I'm not allowed to have a gun, anywhere in my possession or at my house, anything like that. So that can have some serious implications for people who need to carry a gun for a living, like police officers, sometimes armed security guards, people in the military, stuff like that. That can be potentially disastrous. So you definitely want to take these seriously for that reason. Another really important one is that these can cover children.
Mm-hmm.
So if you and we see this a lot in the family law universe, where one person will say, married partners going through a divorce or something, one of them gets an order of protection against the other one, and then you get included in that part of the order will say something like that you're not allowed to be around the kids either, because you're potentially a danger to them. So you need to be especially careful in those scenarios, because although these are not the same as custody orders, this is sort of a safety order, which will override some of those custody orders. So even if you have an order that says you're allowed to see the kids based on whatever parenting time schedule, you still, if you have an order of protection in place, you're not allowed to be around them. So just because that order of protection is going to supersede the custody order. So a lot of times we'll have people that kind of go get one independent of our, or deal with it independent of our family court case, and that can be extremely dangerous to the family law case, because if you get one of these orders of protection out of a different case, all of a sudden you could be really screwed in the family court case. So take those very, very seriously. Um, Procedurally, what happens is when you get one, the person that's asking for it is going to go down to the court, and they're going to usually there's a little term. Most of the courts will have like a little computer terminal or something. There's often a little room or something you go into, and it has a bunch of prompts that'll be like, okay, give me all your demographic information, your name, the name of the other person, and then it'll start asking you things like, okay, what are the acts of domestic violence they've done, or why are you thinking that they're likely to commit an act of domestic violence? So you enter all this stuff into the computer. It spits out a little petition. Then you'll usually give that to the clerks, and then they'll send you into a courtroom where you talk to either a judge or a commissioner. You can do these at city level or county level. They can be either, if you do have an existing family court case, I always tell people to make sure that you go to the Superior Court, because that's where all the family court cases are going. Can circle back to that in a second. But once you go in, one of a handful of things will happen. One is the judge will say, or commissioner, whichever is the case, will say, okay, I'm giving you this order of protection. In which case, then it just has to be served on the other party. Another scenario is the judge or commissioner will say, nope, I'm not seeing it. This doesn't make sense to me. You haven't alleged domestic violence, or, there's not a relationship here, or something like that. Or scenario 3 is the judge or commissioner can say, maybe, I'm not sure, I need to hear a little more. So I'm going to set another hearing and allow that other person to come in, and then we'll talk about it. And so if that scenario happens, then there is another hearing that gets scheduled. You have to come back on this other date, whenever that is. And typically at that scenario, the other person's going to come in and explain why they think it should or should not, presumably should not be entered as an order of protection. Once they've actually been entered, they're good for 2 years. And it didn't used to be this way. It used to be a year. That's changed in the last few years. But now once they're served, it's valid for 2 years, and they do have to be served at some point. So you have to get either a process server or law enforcement. Most people just use law enforcement to do that because there's no additional fee. The police will serve it for you. If you are on the other side of this, say you get the order of protection, or whichever side you're on, just be aware that this is an option. The person that's receiving the order of protection against them, once they get it, they can challenge it. So they can go back to the court once they get it and be like, "Oh, heck no! I shouldn't have this. This is bull." And so they'll get their own hearing to kind of come back in. You're going to have to come back in also if you're the one that got it. And the court has to set a hearing within 10 business days or 5 business days if the order says you're not allowed to be in your home anymore. Once you get that hearing, once you come in, and this is going to be the same thing if you have one of those hearings where you went initially and the judge said, I need to hear more. They'll kind of run these the same way. But the way that hearing will run is you're going to go in. The person that's requesting the order of protection has to go first, and they have to essentially explain why they think it should be left in place. The other person then gets to do, in a much more abbreviated sense, what happens then is the other person explains why they don't think it should be kept in place, and then the judge gets to decide, do we keep it or not? Usually you'll get a ruling right there. In theory, they can, quote, take it under advisement, which means they're going to think about it and circle back to it later and issue an order. The vast majority of the order of protection hearings I see, you get a ruling right there. Mm-hmm. And so a couple important things I always tell people about the orders of protection. One, if you get one of these, so let's say even if you went to this hearing, challenged it, still won, the order of protection is upheld. Some things to keep in mind are, number one, this is just a piece of paper. So even though it makes it illegal to be around the other person, some of the things that it's making it illegal to do are stuff that in my mind is already illegal to do. Like, it's illegal to commit an act of domestic violence. And part of what the order of protection says is don't commit acts of domestic violence. And okay, they're already not supposed to be doing that. Now, if they're around you when they shouldn't be around you, in the moment, if this is a person that is legitimately dangerous and you're waving this piece of paper in front of them, that may not do anything. If they're truly intent on hurting you, waving an order that a court issued last week is not going to stop them from hurting you. And so because of that, I am a big fan of have a plan. Think through, if this person shows up at my house, at my work, somewhere else, at my school, anything like that, think about what you're going to do. Just kind of think through a safety plan, an escape plan. Is there a place you can run to? Is there a way you can defend yourself? How can you get the police there quickly? Just kind of think it through. And don't catastrophize about it, but at least have a plan just in case. And if you've got other people that are on that order of protection, make sure be cautious about what you say with children on this, because you don't want to involve children any more than you have to. But go through and make sure that you have thought out what's going to happen if somebody is showing up trying to hurt you. Another thing that I like to point out about these orders of protection is that, like I said a few minutes ago, they are not the same as a custody order that you find in one of these family court cases, but they have serious implications on these. So one of the things that we see very often in the family court context is because they run these in separate cases. So they'll have like the family court case, and then independently there's going to be the order of protection case. A lot of times people don't want to pay the extra money or something, which I know is frustrating because I know attorneys are expensive and it's hard to swallow paying for another court case. But a lot of times people just go do these on their own. And like I said, it can seriously sabotage your family court case, because if all of a sudden you've got something that restricts you from seeing your kids, your custody fight is kind of moot for the next 2 years, because you're not going to be able to see them under the child component of that anyway. So take it very seriously if you've got one and you've simultaneously got a pending family court case. One other kind of, I guess, sub comment to that, I said I would circle back to this in a second, is that when you have remember I said you can file one of these in a city court, or you can file one of these in the Superior Court. Those are generally the two places you're going to kind of look to. So if you go to the Superior Court, you let me back up another step. You can also file these in justice courts. So there's 3 different places you can go to. The place you want to file this is in the Superior Court if you're in a situation where you have an existing family court case, because there's a statute that says if there's an existing family court case and you filed an order of protection somewhere else, like at a city court, then it has to get transferred over to the Superior Court. And when that happens, it's kind of a mess because it takes forever to transfer the files, and there's all this delay and confusion. So I would highly recommend that if you do have an existing family court case, like, just go straight to the Superior Court and not one of the other places that you could theoretically just go get one at. So just be aware of that, if you do have a family court case, take it seriously and go to the Superior Court to get your order of protection. Last kind of admonition I always give to people about these orders of protection is be aware that they're weirdly subjective. They sound like they're very straightforward, but in my experience, there's a lot of subjectivity built into the ruling. So you could have a situation, and this is my opinion, where you could take a set of facts, present it to a judge or commissioner, and that judge or commissioner might say, yep, I think that the order of protection is warranted here. And then you could go to the next judge or commissioner and be like, no, I don't see it at all. That's been my experience. So just be very aware of that, because that can play into how you're going to be reacting to tactically one of these orders of protection. Just anecdotally, I went to a continuing legal education class several years back, and we went there, and there was a number of judicial officers on this panel that were talking. So it was like judges and commissioners, and one of them said, I keep hearing all these attorneys come in and tell me that orders of protection are so subjective, and they're getting different rulings, and look, they're very simple. All the rules are straightforward. I can tell you what they are right now. And so this person was making an argument that there is no subjectivity really. And then for the next hour, all of these judicial officers were constantly arguing about all the rules and what they would do, and I just was kind of leaning back and going, so I've heard that there's not much subjectivity, but in my experience, there is. I think I've heard most attorneys say there seems to be a lot of subjectivity. I've heard some go so far as to describe it as kangaroo courts. I'm not sure if I would go quite that far. I mean, there are definitely legal standards, but just be aware that you might think in your head, like, this is clearly domestic violence. This, clearly fits all the standards, and you could get in there and just not have the outcome you think. And if that's going to have some sort of tactical impact on your family court case, like, for example, you're the recipient of an order of protection and you think, oh, there's no way anybody's going to uphold this, so I'm just going to go in there and tell the judge what's what, and then all of a sudden it's upheld because this judge just disagreed with your perspective, then that can really sabotage your family court case. So just be aware of those little, I guess, additional notes. And I think that covers everything I wanted to talk about with orders of protection. Chris, did I miss anything, or did you think of anything else?
No, you covered a lot. I guess I was just kind of listening through, and I had a couple thoughts on that. But I guess as it relates to family court cases and working with attorneys and stuff, of course, we're attorneys. We like to help people and have work to do, but particularly if you have a family court case and you're working with an attorney on that side, like you said, involve your attorney in the protective order process so that they know, at least tell them that you're doing it so you can talk it through, even if you don't want to have them show up with you there. Because, like you said, it is so related to your family court case. And, when somebody comes in and is like, hey, yesterday I did this, and you're like, whoa, what? And similarly, the counterpoint is if you have a family court attorney and somebody serves an order of protection on you, tell your attorney, like, dude, don't keep that a secret. That's going to be a bad surprise at an evidentiary hearing down the road. And to your point here also,
As a piggyback to that thought, if any substantive thing happens, like you get arrested in something that's related to children, or like if there's any major thing going on, please tell the
tell
attorney,
them,
because I, as an attorney, hate sitting in evidentiary hearings and then hearing something all of a sudden for the first time and going, wait, what? That
yeah,
changes everything. So just talk to your attorneys about relevant things. Anyway, go ahead.
no, yeah, attorneys were trying to plan ahead and have a strategy, a plan on how we're going to approach a case. Every case has a story to it. The You mentioned, like, you get served an order of protection and you're like, there's no way this is going to stick. So comes up in any legal situation. You can never assume a particular outcome when you go to court, because court is unpredictable. It doesn't matter what it is or how much evidence you have. There's so many examples of we go in feeling certain on the outcome, and that's not what happens. So you always want to be over prepared and prepared for not getting the outcome that you expect.
Yeah.
And then, so domestic violence has a really specific legal definition, and so this could be another area where it's helpful to have an attorney, because you can go through the facts of your case. Like, here's what this other person did to me, and make sure it's presented in a way that meets the specific legal requirements of domestic violence, and make sure you have evidence to support those factors. And this is really going to increase your chances of successfully getting and then keeping that protective order. And on the flip side, if you get served with one of these, maybe your attorney can help poke holes in, like, no, that doesn't meet the technical definition of domestic violence. This is BS. This shouldn't be happening.
Yeah. To expand on that too, I didn't say this, but I should have, and now that you bring that up, the idea of domestic violence is, I think, much broader, legally speaking, in Arizona than most people think it is. A lot of times people think it has to be me smacking my wife or something like that. It's much more than that. So I can never make any physical contact with the other person and have a domestic violence charge. It can be as simple as, like, I'm screaming like a lunatic. That can satisfy some domestic violence definitions. I can hit the wall even if I never touch another person. I can put a hole in something, so be aware that, just because you didn't actually physically touch them does not necessarily mean that isn't domestic violence, legally speaking.
Yeah. I guess another thought, back to why it could be useful having an attorney, or at least having that conversation. When you go in and you're getting your protective order, part of that process is you're going to be describing the specific acts that you believe constituted domestic violence as the basis for that request. And when you get to your hearing, it's somewhat limited in scope. You can't start adding in new examples of domestic violence that you didn't mention in your original petition.
Well,
right?
Sort of. There's actually, you're correct, except there is now a rule that allows you to, this is a recent change in the law, you can amend your petition. The problem is it kind of resets the whole process. So it's not like you can just add it in and keep going. Like you have to go back and say, oh wait, I wanted to add this in, but then if you do that, the other side has a chance to say, well, I need to prepare for that, so we're going to have another hearing, and then you have to come back on another day. So you sort of can, but it makes it a much more convoluted process, and you also sort of can't. So.
Yeah, so if you're showing up, you're rolling into your hearing like today,
right?
And you're like, you start bringing in these extra things, judge, and be like, no. Maybe you can go back and amend it at that point, but you're really
correct.
You need to. Ideally, you get it all in there at first go, so you can get this thing done.
Yes. Well, that's a good pointer, actually, for people that are going in, and even if you don't have an attorney, like, make sure that you've outlined the list of stuff that meets some of these domestic violence allegation requirements, because, like Chris said, you're not going to be able to talk about it, unless it's in your petition. So when you go down to the courthouse and you say, I'm going to fill out that application to get my petition, you want to make sure you've listed all of the potential domestic violence incidents in the petition. So go with a list, like write it down so you don't forget anything, and then you can type it all into that request.
Yeah, that's a good way to plan ahead. Other comment, service. Yeah, a lot of people do use law enforcement, sheriff's department, or whoever to serve those. I guess in our office, our experience, we're using private process servers. It going to be a fee associated with that. No, I don't know, a couple $100 maybe on the high end, but I don't know. I feel like in my experience, they're going to be much more motivated to go ahead and get that served because you're a paying client.
Sure.
Whereas law enforcement is like, I'll fit it in after I investigate this or write these tickets or whatever.
We have had that experience, yes.
So from an efficiency standpoint, that might be worthwhile, especially.
I've had
especially
scenarios where. Yeah,
oh, go ahead. Yeah.
I was saying we've had scenarios where a cop was handed an order of protection to serve, and then it's like a month goes by and nothing happens, and then we're like, come on, we hand it to a process server, and it's like days in and they're served.
And so if you like, you got it, you think there's a legitimate danger, get it, you want to get it served pretty quick.
Yeah.
I guess that segues into, so most people are getting these because they feel there's a legitimate danger, but particularly as it relates to family court, I feel like there are some people try to abuse these things, and sometimes they're successful. Because like we talked about, the definition of domestic violence can be pretty broad. So if it could be somebody yelling at you or throwing a plate into a wall. You could get situations where one party baits the other party into this and then maybe records it on video, goes in and gets their protective order. And in the course of a family court case, this can be and again, this is not what they're for. We're not advocating this. It's just kind of how people abuse it. And so you might want to be on the lookout. You don't want to be set up for this, but somebody might use it to get their spouse out of the house quickly. They're like, I don't want to wait till this divorce is done. I want this person out today. So protective order, get them booted out of the house. That's a fast way to do that. The other thing David touched on, they're not custody or parenting time orders, but if you get your spouse booted out of the house and get the children included on that protective order, then yeah, it kind of is. You just got temporary full parenting time over those kids. Because of that protective order. So this is another way that they could be abused in a family court context, I think.
And it also starts laying the groundwork for establishing that domestic violence occurred, which can have an impact on those custody orders anyway.
Right. Yeah, so if that's what's going on, if somebody's trying to abuse that situation in your family court case, you're going to come back with a very strong defense on that, I think. But I think that was just kind of my thoughts on that.
Okay. Well, I think that hopefully that covers everything on it.
Yeah,
as always, there's a whole set of rules on these. There's case law on it. I mean, they can get pretty complicated. So I mean, we're kind of hitting the 30,000 foot view here of how the orders of protection work. So definitely, if it's feasible for you, at least talk to an attorney, even if you're not hiring one fully to represent you through one of these. Just get yourself informed on kind of the process and things that are specific to your case. So again, you can reach out to us or just somebody that's licensed to practice and has some experience in family law, or at least orders of protection, so you can figure out how to effectively move forward with one of those. But sorry, were you going to say something?
Oh, say hopefully next time we're looking to cover injunctions against harassment, which is another type of protective order, but it has a different relationship status. So that would be something you could get against your neighbor, somebody you don't have any sort of marital or domestic relationship with. But then there's a whole different set of standards. So we'll cover that.
Correct. Okay. So we'll talk about that on another day.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's going to bring us to the end of today's show then. So I guess not a terribly long one, but I think we've covered an important topic in this because these do pop up a lot. I honestly can't count the number of cases we've had that involved like a family court thing, like a divorce or custody fight, and then there's an order of protection going along at the same time. And quite frankly, it's surprising how often people are getting along fine, and then all of a sudden domestic violence pops up the second they're having a breakup. So, whether that's legitimate or whether it's like fabricated, seems to be a blend of those two things. But definitely reach out to an attorney if you're running into one of these situations, at least to just talk to them and get some advice and get yourself informed on what's going on. All right, so you've been listening to Family Law Report. My name is David Enevoldsen with Family Law Guys, an Arizona law firm. I've got with me Chris Rike, my partner. Remember, go talk to that attorney. But otherwise, if you want to talk to us, familylawguys.com, 480-565-8680. Thank you all for listening. Have a great week, and we will see you on the next show.
Take care.